school to the newsboys because nobody wanted these homeless little kids coming into church and being a part of their Sunday school class with other kids. So his dad opened up Sunday school class for homeless kids. His dad would encourage others to come over to his house, and he'd have these big gatherings, and they would be ladies and gentlemen that were invited to dinner. Sometimes they would go off on towards the dining room, and they would be very elegantly dressed, ladies in their long dresses, men in their tuxedos. They would be escorted over towards the dining room, where the dining room doors would be open, and there are all these little homeless kids that were sitting there eating. Many of them never had a full meal. Theodore Roosevelt's dad ensured at least every so often these kids would have a meal. Then his dad would turn to his very wealthy friends and say, okay, I'm opening up my checkbook to write to the Orphans Fund. Will you join me? And Theodore Roosevelt saw that, and that gave him a determination that something needed to be done to help people. He strongly believed that this is a way that the government could help. And these are things that defined him as a man. The death of his father, and then later the death of his wife and his mother, just hours apart. And he was still a young man. He ended up going out into the backwoods, into the Dakota Territory, where he really became his own person. That's when he decided he wanted to become a cowboy. And he would speak very proper English, and these cowboys would listen, and they thought, oh, what on earth? We don't even understand what he's saying. Because the cowboys would get on their horses, let's go ride. And Theodore Roosevelt would say, tarry, ho, thither, yonder. And they didn't even know what he was saying. But it was all part of his becoming what has been dubbed as a rugged individual.
How do you think actions that Theodore Roosevelt took during his presidency can be felt today around the world?
The opening of doors internationally by Theodore Roosevelt, that is what helped to open the doors for the United States internationally today. Today, when there is a need, people look to the United States. Whether it's a drought, whether it's earthquake, it's been not quite 10 years ago, there was a tsunami in the South Pacific about Christmas time. I believe it was in 2005. The United States was right there to help and continues to be right there to help. Whenever there are problems, whether it's militarily, literally with food or aid, helping find airplanes that have gone down, ocean liners that get sunk, the United States will come to the aid. And this is part of what Theodore Roosevelt did during his presidency, was opening up doors for the United States internationally.
So, how did Theodore Roosevelt display his leadership skills?
He was always a person that was very determined to get done what he felt was necessary. He would go through the laws. He was a lawyer, so he understood the law. If he could not get things done that way, then he would go through the court system. Again, being a lawyer, he understood how the legal system worked. If he could not get things done that way, then he would make an appeal to the American people. And the American people would write to their congressman to demand to have things done that Roosevelt thought was for the best of the people.
What do you think other leaders can learn from TR?
Rugged individualism is a very good lesson to learn. Sometimes it's important for one to stand on one's principle. It doesn't mean that others will agree with you. It doesn't mean that others will stand with you. And we've seen that time and again, whether it's this war on terror that we have been in for over 10 years, or whether it's aiding others. Recently, it's been helping in Africa with Ebola. It doesn't mean that everybody agrees with this, the doing, and we have presidents like right now, President Obama has been seeking to aid people in Africa that have Ebola. The United States, because of the examples that have been brought before the president now, through people like Theodore Roosevelt, have been given the example of setting forth, going forth in the world to help other nations.
Right, because we do see congressmen and people just making decisions that they might not agree with, but just for their careers. And TR wasn't one of those people. Fortunately, he was. What do you think were some of the strong points and some of the low points, or the weak points about TR's foreign policy?
With foreign policy, it could be argued that the United States was meddling in the affairs of other countries, whether it was the revolution in Spain, later on it was a revolution in the Philippines, and the United States was right there aiding the Filipino people to gain their freedom. That could be viewed as a strength, but also by some it's viewed as negative, because a lot of people sit back and they say, well, why does the United States have to be a big brother to the world? And Theodore Roosevelt felt very strongly by the African adage of speak softly but carry a big stick. And sometimes that's just the way that politics does run. Whether one is really determined to go into these countries and make the major changes that a politician or two feels is necessary or not. These things become a part of where the United States stands today internationally.
Well, you talked about his famous saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. Do you agree with this way of just thinking, and if so, how do you think that we can use it today?
I think it gets used a lot today, politically. There have been times in history where the United States has had to step in, and albeit there's times where the United States stepped in and it was not necessarily the U.S. responsibility to. Give an example. It was about 2005 or 6 or 7. There was an uprising over in Russia. Some Chechens had gone in to an orchestra concert, and they had literally put bombs under the seats of every single seat in that concert hall. And they told the people, if anybody moved, one slight move will cause the whole place to be blown up, because it would be a chain reaction. The United States could have sat back and said, that's not our problem. But the United States was willing to go over and send military aid or whatever was needed by the Soviet Union, it's the former Soviet Union, by the Russian president, whether it was to help remove the bombs or to help aid the military in the removal of the Chechens that were trying to take over this situation and control the Russian government.
How do you think Theodore Roosevelt's presidency, what do you think our presidents and our future presidents can take away from Theodore Roosevelt's presidency?
We live in a global world. We cannot be isolationists. We must be forthright. And part of this is because the U.S. is a superpower. There have been presidents that do not wish to be a superpower. So we've had some presidents like Wilson who initially started off as an isolationist. Others have understood, and whether people like Nixon or not, that man has always been credited with having